Ethan Carter was just an ordinary man, struggling to provide for his son. But one small act of kindness changed everything. When he helps a lost little girl named Ellie, he crosses paths with her parents James and Rachel Bennett. Wealthy, powerful, and hiding something dangerous. As a reward, Ethan is offered a job at Bennett Developments. It seems like a fresh start, until his house is broken into. A coworker warns him to leave and then vanishes. When a mysterious woman reaches out, claiming the Bennetts have been watching him for years, Ethan realizes he was never meant to escape. Now he's on the run, haunted. The deeper he digs, the more he uncovers a web of missing workers, secret tunnels, and a truth that could cost him everything. Why was Ethan chosen? What are the Bennetts hiding? And will he survive long enough to find out? The truth is buried deep, and the hunt has begun. Like this video if you love a good mystery. Comment your country below and tell us what you think is really going on. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. The morning had started like any other. Ethan Carter, exhausted and struggling, tried to make ends meet after losing his job. Bills piled up, and his old truck barely ran. But none of that mattered when his 8-year-old son, Caleb, looked up at him with trusting eyes. "Are we out of cereal again?" Caleb asked, holding up an empty box like evidence in a crime scene. "Toast today, buddy," Ethan said with a forced smile. After dropping Caleb off at school, he made a quick stop at the grocery store, buying only the essentials. But as he exited, a soft sobbing sound caught his attention. A little girl no older than 6 sat on the curb near the parking lot entrance. Blonde pigtails, a pink backpack too big for her small frame, she buried her face in her hands, crying. Ethan hesitated. He had enough problems of his own. But as he reached his truck, something inside him whispered, "What if this were Caleb?" With a sigh, he turned back. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, crouching down to her level. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The girl sniffled and looked up with wide, teary eyes. I can't find my mommy." His chest tightened. "What's your name?" "Ellie," she whispered. "Okay, Ellie. Do you know your mom's phone number?" Ellie nodded and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack. A phone number and an address were scribbled on it. Ethan pulled out his flip phone and dialed. The call rang. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. "All right," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Let's get you home. I'll drive you there, and we'll find your mom together. Sound good?" Ellie hesitated, then nodded. Ethan helped her into the truck, making sure she was buckled up before pulling out of the lot. The address wasn't far, just 10 minutes away. But something about the situation gnawed at him. How did her mother lose track of her? As they pulled up to the house, a beautiful, well-kept property in an upscale neighborhood, the front door flew open. A woman, her face pale with panic, rushed out. "Ellie!" she cried, running to the truck. Ellie jumped out, sprinting into her mother's arms. "Mommy!" The woman clung to her, eyes welling with tears. Then she looked at Ethan, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you so much. I was frantic. I didn't even realize she was gone until I got home from the store." Ethan raised a reassuring hand. "It's all right. I'm just glad she's safe." The woman wiped her tears, composing herself. "I'm Rachel Bennett. Please, at least let me get your name." "Ethan Carter," he said. Rachel smiled. "Thank you, Ethan. You're a good man." As Ethan drove away, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: pride. Maybe things were finally turning around. But he had no idea that by the time the sun set, his life would never be the same again. Ethan Carter drove home with an unusual sense of peace. Helping Ellie had given him something rare, a moment of purpose. For once, he felt like he had done something right. When he picked up Caleb from school, his son immediately noticed his lighter mood. "You look happy, Dad," Caleb said, grinning as he tossed his backpack into the truck. Ethan chuckled. "I guess I am. Did you get cereal?" Ethan laughed. "Yeah, I got cereal." That night, As he tucked Caleb into bed, Ethan felt something he hadn't in months. Hope. Maybe things really were turning around. But the next morning, that hope was shattered. As Ethan sipped his bitter instant coffee, staring at his dwindling pile of cash, a sleek black car pulled into his driveway. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in his worn-down neighborhood. The engine hummed smoothly as the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. Late 40s, sharp suit, a presence that demanded attention. Ethan instinctively straightened, his grip tightening on his coffee mug. The man approached the porch with a confident stride. "Mr. Carter?" Ethan hesitated before answering. "Yeah, can I help you?" The man smiled and extended a hand. "James Bennett. My wife, Rachel, told me what you did for our daughter yesterday. I wanted to thank you personally." Ethan blinked. The Bennetts? He hadn't expected this. "Oh, it was no big deal," he said, shaking James' hand. "I just wanted to make sure she got home safe." James chuckled. "No big deal? You went out of your way to help a child in need. That's more than most people would do these days." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what I'd hoped someone would do for my son." James studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That says a lot about your character, Mr. Carter." Just then, the passenger door of the luxury car opened. Rachel stepped out, holding a bouquet of flowers, and Ellie peeked out from behind her, smiling shyly. "Hi, Mr. Carter," Ellie called out, waving enthusiastically. Ethan smiled. "Hey, Ellie." Rachel walked up, handing him the flowers. "Ethan, I know you said you didn't want a reward, but we couldn't let your kindness go unrecognized." Ethan hesitated, feeling awkward. "That's really kind of you, but there's more," James added. "If you have a moment, I'd like to talk to you about something." Ethan frowned. This was getting strange. But curiosity got the better of him. "Sure. Come inside." Inside, Ethan's house was small but tidy. He did his best to keep it decent for Caleb. As Rachel and Ellie sat on the couch, James remained standing, glancing around with an unreadable expression. "Nice place," James said. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. "It's home, for now." James nodded, then got to the point. "Rachel mentioned that you're between jobs." Ethan froze. He hadn't expected that. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yeah, times have been tough lately. I'm doing what I can to make ends meet." James exchanged a glance with Rachel before turning back to Ethan. "I run a construction company, Bennett Developments. We're always looking for hardworking people with good values. From what I can see, you'd be a perfect fit." Ethan's eyes widened. "Are you offering me a job?" "I am," James confirmed. "It's not charity, Ethan. You'd be earning every penny. But I recognize good people when I see them, and I'd like to give you a chance." Ethan swallowed hard. A real job. A way out of this constant struggle. For a long moment he didn't know what to say. His throat felt tight, and he had to clear it before speaking. I don't know what to say," he admitted. James smiled. "Just show up on Monday, ready to work." Rachel placed a gentle hand on Ethan's arm. "You deserve this, Ethan. And if there's anything else we can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask." Ellie tugged on his sleeve. "Thank you for helping me, Mr. Carter." Ethan crouched down to her level and smiled. "You're welcome, Ellie. You're a special kid, and I'm glad I was there to help." As the Bennetts left, Ethan stood on the porch, staring after them. A job. A fresh start. For the first time in a long time, he felt like things were looking up. But he had no idea that stepping into the world of the Bennetts was about to change his life forever. Monday morning arrived with a crisp chill in the air. Ethan Carter woke up before his alarm, a mix of excitement and nerves coursing through him. A new job. A fresh start. This was what he and Caleb needed. He made a quick breakfast for Caleb, packing an extra sandwich for his son's lunch before walking him to the bus stop. "Good luck today, Dad." Caleb grinned as the bus pulled up. "Thanks, bud. You too." Ethan gave him a playful salute, watching as his son climbed aboard. The drive to Bennett Developments was quiet, giving Ethan time to think. James Bennett had asked him to report to one of their construction sites on the edge of town. Ethan had worked with his hands before, fixing things, building small projects, but this was his first time stepping into a professional construction company. When he arrived, the site was buzzing with activity, men hauling materials, machines roaring, orders being shouted. Ethan parked his beat-up truck next to a row of sleek company vehicles and stepped out, feeling out of place. James was already there, dressed more casually than before, but still exuding confidence. "Morning, Ethan," James called out, extending a hand. "Morning," Ethan said, shaking it firmly. James turned to a burly man with a salt and pepper beard. "Ethan, this is Carl Russo, our foreman. He'll be showing you the ropes." Carl eyed Ethan, arms crossed. "This the guy?" "He's the guy," James said with a smile. "Give him a fair chance. I have a feeling he'll impress you." Carl grunted, but nodded. "All right, let's get to work." Ethan spent the morning hauling materials, measuring beams, and following every instruction Carl threw his way. The work was demanding, but he welcomed the challenge. He needed this. By lunch, the skepticism in Carl's eyes had softened. "You've done this kind of work before?" Carl asked as they sat on overturned crates, eating their sandwiches. "A little," Ethan admitted. "Not on this scale, though." Carl nodded. "You're a quick learner. I'll give you that." As the afternoon wore on, Ethan started to feel more at ease. He could do this. Maybe things really were turning around. But then something strange happened. Just as the crew was wrapping up for the day, one of the workers approached Ethan. He was thin, nervous looking, glancing around like he was afraid of being seen. "You're the new guy, right?" he asked in a low voice. Ethan frowned. "Yeah, why?" The man hesitated. "Listen, be careful around here." Ethan's pulse ticked up. "What do you mean?" Before the man could answer, Carl's voice rang out. "Hey, quit standing around." The worker flinched and backed away. "Forget it," he muttered before walking off. Ethan watched him go, unease creeping in. That night, as he drove home, his mind raced with questions. Why had the man warned him? What was he afraid of? When Ethan pulled into his driveway, exhaustion weighing on him, he noticed something strange. His front door was slightly ajar. His chest tightened. He had locked it that morning. Heart pounding, he pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Nothing seemed out of place until he stepped into the kitchen. The drawer where he kept his important papers was open, its contents rifled through. Nothing was missing. Someone had been in his house, but they hadn't taken anything. They had been looking for something. Ethan's stomach twisted. What the hell had he just walked into? Ethan Carter stood frozen in his own kitchen, heart hammering against his ribs. Someone had been here. Someone had gone through his things. He scanned the room again. Nothing was missing. Whoever broke in hadn't been looking for valuables. They wanted information. But about what? His gut twisted. His bank account was nearly empty. He had no enemies. The only thing different in his life was his new job at Bennett Developments. And the Bennetts themselves. Ethan locked every door and window before checking on Caleb. His son was fast asleep, unaware of the unease now settling over their home. He wanted to believe it was just a random break-in, but something told him it wasn't. Lying in bed that night, Ethan replayed the warning from the nervous worker. Be careful around here. What the hell was he missing? Ethan arrived at the construction site earlier than usual. The unease from the break-in lingered, but he forced himself to focus. Carl greeted him with a nod. Good. You're early. Got a lot to do today. Ethan worked harder than ever, trying to drown out his thoughts. But he kept scanning the site, looking for the man who had warned him. The day before. By lunchtime, he still hadn't seen him. Hey, Carl, Ethan said, trying to sound casual. Where's that guy I talked to yesterday? Skinny guy, dark hair? Carl's expression darkened. Who? Ethan's stomach dipped. The worker. He came up to me yesterday. Carl sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. No one came in today. If you're talking about Nick, he quit last night. Ethan's blood ran cold. Quit. Carl nodded. Didn't say a word. Just left. A chill crept up Ethan's spine. Nick had warned him, and now he was gone. Ethan forced himself to nod. Yeah, okay. But inside a question burned. Had Nick really quiet? Or had something happened to him? That evening, as Ethan pulled into his driveway, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello. A woman's voice, low and urgent. Ethan Carter. His grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? You don't know me, but I know about you. I know about your new job. And I know what they're hiding. Ethan's pulse pounded. Who's hiding what? A pause. Then, if you want answers, meet me at Briarwood Diner, 9 p.m. Come alone. The line went dead. Ethan stared. At the phone, his mind spinning. Nick had vanished. His house had been searched. Now a stranger was calling him about secrets. Something was very, very wrong. And Ethan was about to find out exactly what. Ethan Carter sat in his truck outside Briarwood Diner, fingers tapping against the steering wheel. The neon sign flickered, casting a dull glow onto the rain-slick pavement. He had almost convinced himself not to come. Almost. But Nick was gone. His house had been searched. And now, some mystery woman had called him, claiming to know the truth. Ethan wasn't the kind of guy who walked into traps, but he also wasn't the kind of guy who ignored warning signs. With a deep breath, he stepped out of the truck and entered the diner. The place was nearly empty, save for an old man at the counter and a waitress pouring coffee. In the back booth, a woman sat alone, wearing a dark green jacket, her auburn hair tucked under a baseball cap. As soon as their eyes met, she motioned for him to sit. Ethan slid into the booth. You're the one who called me. The woman studied him. I wasn't sure you'd show. Yeah, well, I'm here. Now tell me, who are you? She glanced around before leaning in. My name is Mara Jensen. I used to work for Bennett Developments. Ethan stiffened. Used to? She nodded. I was fired 6 months ago when I started asking the wrong questions. Ethan's mind raced. What kind of questions? Mara exhaled sharply. About the missing workers. About the off-the-books projects. About what James Bennett is really running behind that construction company. Ethan frowned. Missing workers? Mara's expression darkened. Nick warned you, didn't he? Ethan's breath caught. Nick. You know what happened to him? Her jaw tightened. Nick didn't quit. He disappeared. Just like the others. A slow, creeping dread settled over Ethan. I don't understand, he said. What does this have to do with me? Mara's green eyes locked onto his. Because you helped Ellie. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Mara leaned in closer. You think it was a coincidence? That you just happened to find James Bennett's daughter all alone? That her mother personally brought you into their lives? Ethan's throat went dry. You were chosen, Ethan. They're watching you. The words sent a chill down his spine. He shook his head. That doesn't make sense. Why would they? Mara slid something across the table. A photo. Ethan looked down. His pulse stuttered. It was an old surveillance picture, grainy, but unmistakable. It showed Ethan, years ago, standing outside a Bennett Developments site. Mara's voice was low and steady. You've been part of this story longer than you think, Ethan. And if you don't walk away now, you might not get the chance later. Ethan clenched his fists. His gut told him Mara was right. But what scared him more? The fact that James Bennett had chosen him? Or the fact that he had no idea why? Ethan Carter gripped the faded photograph, his pulse pounding in his ears. His own face stared back at him from years ago, standing outside a Bennett Developments site he had no memory of visiting. This is impossible, he muttered, looking up at Mara Jensen. I've never worked for Bennett Developments before. I've never even met James Bennett until last week. Mara folded her arms. Are you sure about that? Ethan opened his mouth, then hesitated. Was he sure? A dull ache pulsed at the back of his skull. He had worked so many odd jobs over the years, barely scraping by. Could he have been at one of Bennett's sites before? Was there a missing piece in his own past? You don't remember, Mara said, reading his hesitation. That's exactly what they want. Ethan exhaled sharply. This is insane. You're telling me the Bennetts somehow planned for me to find Ellie? That they've been what? Watching me for years. Mara shook her head. Not watching. Cleaning up. A chill ran through him. Listen, Mara said, lowering her voice. I don't have all the answers, but I know this Bennett Developments is a front. They have projects that don't exist on paper, missing workers no one reports missing, and connections to people who make problems disappear. I tried to dig too deep, and now I'm running for my life. Ethan swallowed hard. If you're in danger, why reach out to me? Mara's expression hardened. Because you still have a way out. Ethan leaned back in the booth, tension coiling in his chest. He had spent years struggling, scraping by for Caleb's sake. This job with Bennett had finally felt like a way forward. But now it felt like a trap. You said workers have gone missing, he said slowly. How many? Mara hesitated, then slid something else across the table. A list of names. Ethan scanned them. There were at least a dozen. His eyes landed on the last name, Nick Halpern. His stomach twisted. Nick warned me, and now he's gone. Mara nodded grimly. They got to him before he could tell you the truth. Ethan clenched his jaw. Every instinct told him to walk away, take Caleb, and never look back. But one question burned in his mind. What do they want from me? Mara hesitated before answering. I don't know, but if you keep working for them, you'll find out soon enough. Ethan exhaled. He had two choices: ignore Mara's warning and pretend none of this was real, or start digging. And Ethan Carter had never been good at leaving questions unanswered. Ethan parked a block away from the Bennett Developments headquarters, his hands gripping the steering wheel. It was a modern glass building, quiet at this hour. He had to know the truth. Slipping out of his truck, he moved toward the side of the building, avoiding the security cameras. If Mara was right, there were files, proof hidden somewhere inside. His gut screamed at him to turn back, but he ignored it. As he reached the back door, he hesitated, his pulse hammering. Then, just as he reached for the handle, a light flipped on inside. A shadow moved past the window. Someone else was already here. And Ethan was about to find out if they were friend or foe. Ethan Carter froze, his breath caught in his throat. Someone was inside Bennett Developments. At this hour, the building should have been empty. He crouched low behind a row of shrubs, watching the shadow move past the window. Whoever it was, they weren't using the main lights, just a dim flashlight beam flickering across the glass. Not a security guard. Someone who didn't want to be seen. Ethan's instinct screamed for him to leave. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't some undercover investigator. But Nick had vanished. His house had been searched. And now, someone else was sneaking around Bennett's headquarters in the middle of the night. He had to know why. Heart pounding, Ethan crept toward a side entrance. He reached for the handle locked. But as he pulled back, he noticed a small piece of tape over the latch. Someone had rigged the door to stay open. Adrenaline shot through him. He slipped inside, stepping carefully down a darkened hallway. The air smelled of fresh paint and industrial cleaner. The building was too perfect, too sterile, like something meant to hide its real purpose. Footsteps echoed from up ahead. Ethan pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing. The flashlight beam cut across the hallway, then vanished. Whoever was here, they were heading deeper inside. Do I follow? Or get the hell out of here? His fists clenched. Nick had tried to warn him. If he walked away now, he might never learn the truth. Gritting his teeth, Ethan moved forward. The footsteps led him to a steel door marked Restricted Access. A keypad glowed faintly beside it. Ethan barely had time to process before he heard a quiet beeping. Someone was entering a code. The lock clicked. Ethan ducked behind a support beam just as the door swung open. A figure slipped inside, their face hidden beneath a hood. Ethan's pulse thundered. Who the hell was that? The door began to close. Move now or lose your chance. Ethan lunged forward, catching the edge of the door before it locked. Slowly, carefully, he pulled it open, just wide enough to slip through. Inside, the air was different, cold, sterile. Unlike the office space above, this was something else entirely. A storage rooms. Rows of metal filing cabinets lined the walls, along with locked crates marked with serial numbers. A single desk sat in the middle, papers scattered across its surface. And then Ethan spotted the intruder. The hooded figure was rifling through a filing cabinet, muttering curses under their breath. Ethan stepped forward. "Hey!" The person whipped around, and Ethan's stomach dropped. It wasn't some hired thief. It was Mara Jensen. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ethan hissed. Mara's eyes widened. "I could ask you the same thing." Before Ethan could respond, a faint buzzing sound filled the room. A security alarms. Mara paled. "They know we're here." Ethan's blood ran cold. Heavy footsteps pounded somewhere upstairs. Someone was coming, and Ethan had just walked straight into a trap. The alarm's shrill hum vibrated through the air, sending a bolt of panic through Ethan Carter. Heavy footsteps thundered upstairs, fast, deliberate. Someone knew they were here. Mara Jensen spun toward Ethan, eyes blazing. "We have 60 seconds before they reach this room. We need to move. Now." Ethan gritted his teeth. He wanted answers, but not at the cost of getting caught. Mara grabbed a manila folder from the filing cabinet and shoved it into her jacket. Then, she turned to a locked crate, yanking at the latch. Sealed tight. "Help me get this open," she whispered urgently. But Ethan was already looking for a way out. No windows. One exit. And footsteps closing in. "Mara, help me, damn it," she snapped. "This could be what we need." Ethan clenched his fists. Stay and pry open the crate, or escape before they're trapped. The choice was made for him. A metallic click echoed in the hallway. The sound of a gun's safety being disengaged. Mara's face paled. "They're armed." Ethan's gut twisted. This wasn't just security. This was something else. He grabbed Mara's wrist and yanked her toward the door. "We're leaving. Now." She resisted for half a second, then gave in, tucking the folder deeper into her jacket. Ethan eased the door open. The hallway outside was empty, but not for long. Shadows stretched across the walls, approaching fast. He spotted an air vent near the ceiling, just wide enough to squeeze through. He pointed. "Up there." Mara's eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding me. Move." Ethan cupped his hands. Mara stepped into them, scrambling up and pulling herself inside. He followed, gripping the edges and hauling himself up just as a flashlight beam sliced through the room below. A deep, menacing voice filled the space. They were just here. Ethan held his breath. Not security. These men were hunters. Mara tensed beside him, her breathing shallow. A second voice growled, "Boss isn't gonna like this. Find them." Ethan's pulse pounded. Boss? James Bennett. Everything inside him screamed run. Mara nudged him, whispering, "Follow me." Crawling through the vent was claustrophobic hell. The metal groaned beneath them, every movement sending sharp echoes down the narrow space. Behind them, voices barked orders. "They're still in the building. Lock it down." Ethan's stomach dropped. They were sealing the exits. Mara cursed under her breath. "They weren't expecting us, but they're damn sure not letting us leave." Ethan clenched his jaw. He'd stepped into something far bigger than he'd ever imagined. And now, the Bennetts knew he was a threat. And threats had a way of disappearing. Ethan Carter crawled through the narrow air duct, sweat slicking his palms. Below them, Armed men searched the building. If they were caught, there would be no explanations, only silence. Mara Jensen moved ahead, her breathing sharp but controlled. She had done this before. Ethan's mind raced. Who were these men? Security? Or something worse? Then he heard it. A voice. Mr. Bennett wants him alive. Ethan's chest tightened. James Bennett. This wasn't just about Mara. They had come for him. Mara cursed under her breath. We have to get out now. Where does this vent lead? Ethan whispered. Back in trance, she muttered. But they'll be watching it. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. They needed a distraction. Then he had an idea. You still have that folder? He asked. Mara nodded, patting her jacket. Yeah, why? Give me a page. Just one. Mara hesitated, then pulled out a sheet and handed it over. Ethan clenched it between his fingers. Keep going, he whispered. When you reach the exit, wait for my signal. Mara's eyes narrowed. What are you, trust me? She stared at him for a beat, then nodded and crawled ahead. Ethan took a deep breath, then turned and went the other way. The air vent rattled as Ethan moved toward the east wing. His heart pounded against his ribs, every instinct screaming at him to run the other way. But if they wanted him alive, that meant he was leverage. And if they were focused on him, Mara could escape. Below, two men passed beneath the vent. Ethan waited time their steps, then dropped the stolen document through the vent. The paper fluttered to the floor. A flashlight beam immediately caught it. There! Footsteps thundered in his direction. Ethan kicked open the vent and dropped down, landing hard. He bolted, knocking over a shelf to slow them down. Stop! A gunshot ripped through the air. Ethan swerved, heart hammering, shoving through a door into an office. Windows. No fire escapes. Footsteps pounded toward him. No way out. Ethan braced himself. Then he saw it. A maintenance panel near the floor. Just wide enough. He dove for it, yanking it open and squeezing inside as the door burst open behind him. A voice cursed. Where the hell did he go? Ethan held his breath. The men stormed past the panel, boots thudding. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then he slipped out and ran like hell. Mara was waiting at the back door, her eyes wide as Ethan sprinted toward her. You're insane, she hissed. Did it work? Ethan gasped. Mara glanced past him. Yeah, they're still searching inside. But we have about 30 seconds before they realize. Ethan didn't hesitate. Together, they slipped into the shadows. The night swallowed them whole. For now, they were free. But Ethan knew the truth. James Bennett wouldn't stop hunting him. And now, there was no turning back. Ethan Carter and Mara Jensen ran through the dimly lit alleyways behind Bennett Developments, their breath heavy in the cold night air. They had escaped for now. But Ethan knew this wasn't over. James Bennett wasn't the kind of man to let things go. As they reached a deserted parking lot, Mara yanked open the door of a battered sedan. Get in, she ordered. Ethan hesitated. His gut told him that getting deeper into this mess was a mistake. But it was too late to walk away. Nick had vanished. His house had been searched. And now, Bennett's men wanted him alive. Without another word, he climbed in. Mara floored the gas. The tires screeched as they sped into the night. 10 minutes later, they pulled into an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. Mara cut the engine and turned to Ethan. You need to see what's in this folder, she said, pulling the stolen documents from her jacket. Ethan took a deep breath. Then he opened it. Inside were employment records, blueprints, and financial reports. But what caught his attention was a list of missing workers. His stomach clenched. Nick Halpern. His name was on it along with dozens of others. Some had been listed as transferred. Others simply had no termination date. Ethan flipped to the next page. Blueprints. Underground tunnels beneath a Bennett Development site. Mara's voice was tight. They're hiding something underground, Ethan. And whatever it is, People are dying over it. Ethan clenched his fists. What kind of construction company has secret tunnels? Mara shook her head. A company that isn't really about construction. A chilling realization crept over him. You think Nick found out? Mara nodded. And that's why he disappeared. Ethan exhaled, his mind racing. Whatever James Bennett was involved in, it was bigger than they'd thought. Then Mara's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. Her face went pale. We need to move. Now. Ethan's pulse kicked up. What is it? Mara turned the phone toward him. On the screen was a text message. Unknown number. You should have walked away. The blood drained from Ethan's face. Then, the gas station lights flickered out. A single pair of headlights appeared in the distance, growing closer. They'd been found. Mara slammed the car into reverse. Hold on. The engine roared as they tore away from the gas station, the pursuing car accelerating. Behind them, Ethan's knuckles turned white. James Bennett wasn't just watching anymore. Now, he was hunting them. The car skidded around a sharp curve, tires screeching as Mara fought to keep control. Headlights glared in the rearview mirror, growing closer. Whoever was chasing them wasn't planning to let them go. Ethan turned in his seat, spotting a second car joining the pursuit. His pulse hammered. They're boxing us in, he shouted. Mara gritted her teeth. Not if I can't help it. She jerked the wheel hard, sending them off the main road onto a dirt path. The car jolted violently, rocks kicking up behind them. The pursuers hesitated just for a second before following. Where does this road lead? Ethan demanded. Mara's hands gripped the wheel. It doesn't. Ethan's stomach dropped. What? Ahead, the road ended at a steep cliffside. Mara slammed the brakes. The car fishtailed before stopping inches from the drop. The chasing vehicles weren't as lucky. The first swerved wildly, its tires catching loose gravel, and then it plunged over the edge. The second barely stopped in time. Ethan and Mara didn't wait. They bolted from the car, vanishing into the dense woods. For the first time that night, the silence was suffocating. Only their ragged breathing filled the air. Mara leaned against a tree, clutching her side. That bought us time, but not much. Ethan looked back toward the distant glow of the city. They won't stop coming. She nodded. No. And now you know why. Ethan clenched his fists. Nick was gone. The tunnels. The missing workers. The lies. James Bennett wasn't just a businessman. He was something else entirely. And now Ethan and Mara were his biggest problem. Mara met his gaze. We have two choices. We run or we fight. Ethan exhaled slowly. For Caleb. For Nick. For the truth. We fight. Mara smiled grimly. Good. Then, let's finish this. Together, they disappeared into the night. And the hunt was just beginning. What happens next? You decide. What do you think Ethan and Mara should do next? Go deeper into the mystery or expose the truth? Comment your country, and let's see where our audience is from. Drop your thoughts below. Like if you want part 2. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The story isn't over, it's just getting started.